Hello, everybody. How you doing? Thanks a lot for joining us today at the Lenovo stage at Gnomon School here in Hollywood for our event, The Art of Borderlands 3, an event with Gearbox Software. My name is Den Johnson, and I'm the Associate Director of Placement and Alumni Relations here at Gnomon, and it's with great honor that I'll be hosting our guests tonight. But before I introduce them, a couple of things. Today's event is sponsored by Lenovo, so a huge thank you as always to Lenovo. Go ahead. Don't be shy. It's Lenovo, folks. So a huge thank you as always goes out to Lenovo for helping us to bring these free educational events to you from the Gnomon campus. Today's presentation is powered by Lenovo and Intel technology, which our students also use here on campus. Another special thanks goes out to Wacom for the Cintiq and Intuos Pro setup on the stage today that our presenters will be using. We're very lucky to have such good support from our industry friends and partners and appreciate Wacom for the great support. If you need to leave the stage at any point, please help us by keeping noise to a minimum. So thanks in advance for keeping all of that to a minimum. We can help you. Just let us know. Our staff outside can give you directions to the nearest bathrooms or anything else you may need. So with all of that said, folks, you ready? All right. I'd like to introduce our guest tonight. First off, Samantha is a VFX artist at Gearbox Software with over 6 years of experience in game development. She started her career as a designer for an indie game titled Dub Wars, where she found her love for visual effects while creating lasers and explosions for the indie title. Samantha's most recent work can be seen in Borderlands 3. Folks, please welcome Samantha Spray, VFX artist for Borderlands 3. Come on out, Samantha. All right. Awesome. Thanks so much. Next up, Seung has over 20 years of industry experience from Disney, EA, InSpace, and Gearbox Software. He started at Disney working on feature films including Pocahontas, Mulan, Tarzan, and Lilo and Stitch as a traditional animator before moving on to storyboards for the movie's games. Seung is now at Gearbox Software as an effects artist where he takes point on the many needs of 2D animation-related projects and assets. Please welcome to the stage Seung Kim, VFX artist for Borderlands 3. Awesome, thank you so much. Next up, we have Caitlyn. She started out with a traditional art and graphic design background before discovering technical art at the Florida Interactive Entertainment Academy. She was offered a place at Gearbox where she has contributed to titles like Borderlands, the pre-sequel, Battleborn, and Borderlands 3. As a technical artist, her role has included art, tool coding, art optimization analysis, art asset creation, and researching new technologies. Please welcome to the stage Caitlyn Trout, technical artist for Borderlands 3. Awesome. Next up we have Nicholas. Nicholas has 11 years of experience in art at Gearbox, starting with an art internship on Aliens, Colonial Marines. During the radical art style change of Borderlands, Nick was invited to join Gearbox's first ever VFX team, later moving on to a technical artist role for Duke Nukem Forever before returning to VFX with Borderlands 2, Aliens, and Battleborn. Since then, he has been serving as Gearbox VFX director with Borderlands 3 as his first Borderlands title in the new role. Nicholas believes in making VFX that serve gameplay, reinforcing game feel concepts to make the punchiest shooters possible. Please welcome to the stage, last and finally, Nicholas Wilson, VFX director of Borderlands 3 at Gearbox Software. Yeah!
How's it going, everybody? My name's Nick, but you already know that. I'm here to talk to you today about the visual effects of Borderlands 3. Little game came out, indie title. You might have heard of it. And I just want to warn everybody before we get going on this, the effects are very flashy. You know that because you've been going to school here. But in case the video is going to give you an issue, just be careful whenever we switch over to a video. You might want to look away from the screen. A lot of really bright explosions and quick camera cuts, that type of thing. This is everything you just heard about me. I worked on a bunch of games for Gearbox, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool place, pretty cool job. There was some concern when we first did this that the picture was disingenuous because I'm always wearing my glasses, but you can tell me how you feel about that later. Samantha, you just heard about as well. Seung Kim. We couldn't fit everything Seung did onto a slide, okay? I'm sorry. But this is a healthy selection, handpicked. And then Caitlyn's going to be here to talk to you about our destruction pipeline today, so I'm really looking forward to that portion of the presentation. So what is Borderlands? How many people in here, by show of hands, know what Borderlands is? That's most of the room, and that's fantastic. But if you can imagine, way back when I was starting my career in video games, is like that wasn't necessarily a brand that anybody knew about. And the original pitch for Borderlands, the elevator pitch, was basically Diablo meets Halo, right? Take your favorite elements of an action RPG that is loot focused and a first-person shooter, and bring those things together into one game. Also, we just mentioned the radical art style change. If anyone's seen like really early Borderlands art, you know that we didn't always have this heavy inking style that we all know and love today. Early on, everything was a little bit more like photorealistic. Now we got the heavy inks. Feels pretty good. Happened really late in development, but we're super proud of it. And then you already know it's chaotic, explosive, hyper-real, co-op first-person shooter. So, in first-person shooter, you must shoot.
I can punch. Piss and run where we bullets. All thieves, hell yeah! Sweet.
And then you must loot. Very good. That was the real drop, by the way. I didn't handpick the items. So Borderlands franchise history, give you some idea. My career started all the way back in 2008, so I had about a year on development of Borderlands 1. Fancy that. The game becomes a humongous success, and we end up making a bunch of sequels, Borderlands 2, Borderlands pre-sequel, both very similar style of game, and then Tales from the Borderlands, which is more, interactive movie, type of thing, choose your own adventure. I like those type of games. I've always been a big fan. But that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about this thing. Thank you. And as I was saying when we were getting prepped here, it's great to be on the other side of this where this game is out and we're not just, sweating bullets about it. Instead, we just sweat about being on stage. So visual effects goals for Borderlands 3. There was a lot we were trying to accomplish because there had been about 7 years between Borderlands 2 and Borderlands 3. And the big things for me personally were we wanted to improve the feel of the combat. That was super, super important to me. We want to give you increased interactivity with the environment, maybe through breaking some of it, and achieve a higher level of visual polish as well. We were very under the gun with the early Borderlands games, and I always just felt that we could deliver on a higher level of quality with Borderlands 3, and I really feel like we did, and I hope that you do too. It's presumptuous of me. We also want to do more stylized visual effects, and I think you're going to find in this presentation that we've actually got quite a lot of that in there. And finally, this was our first Unreal Engine 4 game, so we had a pretty big technological leap to make that way as well. So to talk about some of the stylization of our VFX and just the way that we do real-time visual effects. I want to bring Samantha Spray up here.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm going to be talking about the visual effects pipeline for the Guardians of Borderlands 3. I've kind of broken it down into two sections. The first is pre-visualization. This is where we get context, get reference, we establish the shape and color language, and then we go into production, where we create the textures, the materials, we test and optimize those, and then we put them all together into the particle systems and hook them up to all the blueprints where they need to be, and then we test and optimize further. So to kind of give a specific example for this talk, I'm going to be talking about the energy bombs that the Herald Guardians use. Just to kind of give some background about the Guardians, there are otherworldly alien enemy faction. So they've kind of got like this mystical tech alien feel. All right, so to begin, we start with previs, because pre-visualization is hard to say. So the first thing we do as VFX artists, we need to know what we're making. We are creating the visuals to communicate the gameplay to the player. So how do we do that? The first thing is we talk with designers. They're the ones who are making the gameplay. So usually I'm talking to them with a Jira task, or I'll go talk with them at their desk, or we have meetings. It's very important to have interpersonal communication skills. We got to ask a lot of questions, like, what kind of effect is this? Is this an attack? If so, is it melee? Is it a projectile? Does it affect an area? If so, how big? What's the damage type? For our specific example, it's a sort of grenade toss. So the Herald charges it up in his staff, throws it, impacts, deals shock damage in a 250 Unreal unit radius. So we need 3 particle systems. We're going to need the charge up, the projectile, and the impact. So what are these supposed to look like? A lot of concept doesn't actually get made specifically for visual effects. So I like to look at a lot of the concept that was done specifically for like the character or that faction, or even look at like the environments that they're supposed to be in. Can pull a lot of shape and color information from those things. I got pretty lucky with this piece of concept. It was originally for the spirits. The Guardians will spawn a spirit, that's what we call it, when they die on occasion, that'll like fly to the other guys and buff them up. So this was kind of our original idea for that. We decided to simplify it later, just kind of to match some of the other language happening in the game. But I wound up pulling a lot of inspiration from this and using specifically that spirit, the red and purple, as like after images for the Herald's teleport and when the Guardians die. And then Guardians are an established faction in Borderlands. They are really prevalent in the pre-sequel, so I had a lot of content that I can go back in and look at, so that was really helpful. And then, finally, we need to like bring this all together and actually make it useful for us. So I like to do a lot of sketching to kind of see like, okay, I know there are these sort of abilities that we're going to be using, so I'm going to try out these different shapes in these like swipe attacks or in these projectiles. You can even do, like, if you're wondering how like the animation or the motion should look, you can do these sketches in Cascade or whatever particle system that you're working with. I also like to put together mood boards. I like to take, or I wound up taking a lot of screenshots from the pre-sequel of a lot of the particle systems used there, and even some of the textures. And then I can like bring them all together, like in Photoshop or something, alongside with the concept art that I really found useful. And I can play around with the hue shifting to kind of find what colors I want to use. For Borderlands 3, we're trying to push it towards a more like red color palette as opposed to like purple and pink colors. So I could take a screenshot of already existing effects and play around with the hue shift with that. I also wanted to bring some elements that we used in previous games, such as like the wispy smoke and some of like the shock and bright glowy bits, and marry them a little bit more with that red color palette that we're introducing, but also introduce more of these like sharp angular shapes, more stylized look. So now that we're all done with previs, we get into production, actually make our assets. So here we start with the textures. Textures for visual effects tend to be more, or a little bit different than other textures in the game. They're not like you would find on character models. You can think of them more as components. We bring them all together to create the whole. So a lot of our textures wind up being an assortment of images that we can use. We usually subdivide them into sub-UVs or frames. In these instances, they're just not necessarily related images. We can have like a flip book where each image or each frame is like the next frame in an animation, or we can just, there's just a bunch of different shapes for variety that we can use. We also do a lot of tiling texture. This is a texture I made for the spider ants. I made that in Substance, which I tend to use a lot for like the tiling textures. I like to use Photoshop more for like the hand-painted textures. I feel like I get a lot more freedom to get the specifics that I want. And then we need to bring, in order to see our textures in the game, we have to make our shaders or materials. So for the wispy smoke, I decided to do some UV distortion, so I'm scrolling some noise through the UVs just really subtly to get a lot more movement and variety. I wound up not doing a flip book for these textures because they're really repetitive. You wind up seeing, you can find the pattern pretty easily. So with these specific particles, I thought it would get a lot more mileage, a lot more variety if I just use these 4 images. They all scroll that texture. I can rotate them randomly. They can be different sizes. I'll get a lot more mileage out of higher resolution frames than I would if they were just in a flip book. The next kind of important material for the Guardian effects is I use a lot of trails. So I needed to get a lot of mileage out of this material. So I wound up creating a bunch of parameters so that if I wanted to just have straight particle color, I had that option. Or if I wanted to kind of lerp between a darker color through the edges and then like a lighter color through the middle to really give some contrast, I also had that option. Or I could just plug in like a gradient map. So here are some examples of this material in use. So the one here on the right is just straight particle color, so it's a lot brighter overall. And then these two over here on the left, or my left, I guess, they're actually using the lerping between 2 colors, but they're using sort of different colors to accomplish the same thing, but we still get a lot of variety. All right. Testing and optimization. This is very important. We tend to make our textures in powers of 2. This is for a couple of reasons. They're more efficient in RAM. There are compression methods that use them more efficiently than other resolutions. They allow us to MIP or create level of details. So if we import a 2048 texture into the engine, we can MIP it down or lot it down to like a 1024 if we need to save on memory. The next is texture waste. So stepping away from the Guardians for a second, this is a gore blood drip texture that we actually have in the game. You can see there's a lot of space in this texture. It's just a 2x1 sub-UV texture, but you can see there's a whole bunch of space between them. So if all I did for this example was like move the 2 drips closer together in like Photoshop, and you can see I've cut the memory of this texture in half just by doing this. And then because they're powers of 2, I can lot this down in Engine, and I get even more savings in memory. And then I could even push it further to 256 by 512. And all these images are at those resolutions, and you can't really tell a difference. So it's really important that we keep in mind how big these textures are going to be on the screen so that we don't waste memory trying to put in detail that the player's not even going to see. So we end up not even using, those large of textures for a lot of our stuff. So even though we didn't make it as efficiently as we would have liked, we were able to load the texture down to 512 by 512. So it still saved on memory, but it could have been better. Another thing you want to think about, like when you're making materials especially, is the instruction count. So this will determine all the calculations that the GPU has to make per frame. And the more calculation has to do, the longer a frame's going to take to render, and then you're going to have less frames per second. So a good thing to kind of remember is that 500 instruction count is going to cause a lot more problems than an 80 instruction count material. Some hidden costs with the materials is going to be like the blend mode. Is it opaque? Is it translucent? Is it lit or is it unlit? With translucency, you wind up with a bunch of layers on the screen because, like I said, particle systems are a big group of components. So if you have a whole bunch of translucent texture or materials, you're going to wind up looking through 8 to 32 layers of translucency, and your 80 instruction count material, that's like looking through 640 instructions instead. This is the shader complexity view mode in Cascade, by the way, so you can test your particle systems that way. It's really helpful. Some other hidden costs are with the material function nodes. You just have to keep in mind that these are made up of other material expression nodes or atomic nodes. So these will count towards your instruction count. So just keep that in mind. It's not that you shouldn't use these things or that you shouldn't make things at higher resolution textures. These are things that you should keep in mind and be careful with and be aware of, like where are they being used. All right. So actually getting into the particle system. So each of these components, use their own emitter or sub-emitter in the particle system. So starting off, we've got the orb for like the projectile. I wanted these to have a black hole sort of feel, like really unstable. So I accomplished this by using vertex offset in the material. So it just is panning this noise texture through the UVs, and then I'm sending that to the vertex offset in the material. So I wanted some options about, the noise, or some of the attributes for the noise, like the scaling or the amplitude. I wanted that to be in the particle system, so I used dynamic parameters, because I didn't know how big this was supposed to be or if I needed to use this in multiple places. So kind of demonstrating here, I'm just scaling the noise for the vertex offset, and you can see it's a lot more volatile, and it winds up looking really fast, even though we didn't change anything with the speed. The next really important part for this effect was going to be the trail. I really wanted to incorporate that smoky kind of trail look, and I also wanted to be able to tell the player like where this is being thrown from, what kind of is the trajectory, like where it's going. And a big part of trails is their lifetime. This will determine how long the trail is overall and just how long it stays on the screen. So to kind of avoid performance and overdraw, you want to keep this long enough that it tells the player what's happening, but not long enough to, cause any dips in frame rate. Another important thing about ribbons in particular is the way we spawn them. We usually have two options for that. We can spawn the particles by distance, or we can spawn them by time. If we spawn them by time, this relies a lot on the frame rate, and frame rate winds up being variable, the frame length, so you can wind up missing frames. So you get a bunch of stretching or pinching as a result. That was what I originally used for the trails, and I got this bug from QA, so thank you, QA. And you can see there's just a bunch of seams, and it's really ugly, and we want to be, this needs to be quality. So I changed it over to be spawned by distance, so it doesn't matter how fast this projectile is traveling or how many frames get dropped or skipped, it's going to always spawn the same number of particles. And then I wanted the smoke trail to have a little bit more volume. The ribbon is nice when you're looking from the side, but you need a little bit more to kind of surround it to actually give it some depth. So that's where these little smoke particles come in. You don't want the smoke to pop in. You want it to look really natural. And for smoke, you want them to kind of grow in slowly and then expand quickly during the middle of their lifetime and then kind of, ease out, which, this is the ease in, ease out principle of animation. So this is how you get more of a natural look. You could use linear, but if you think about nothing really accelerates that way, that's not really a natural look. This is supposed to deal shock damage, so I need some way to communicate that to the player. In this case, I'm just okay, I'll just use some lightning texture. And this is one of those flipbook textures, but I wanted these to be really snappy. So I'm just randomly picking a frame when these particles spawn, and then these all have really short lifetimes. They're 0.06 to 0.15 seconds long. You feel them more than you see them. This really gives a kind of sinister look to them, feeling to them. Yeah. And then, we gotta make it glow. So To kind of give some contrast to the trail, I made a bunch of little glowy bits to kind of follow along. These are small, so I can have them live a little bit longer than the wispy trail, and still, direct the player like where this has come from. And then I also added a larger glow to like where the orb is. I could have relied more on the post-process bloom, but I wasn't sure exactly what the exposure would be in each of the maps that these would be in, and I wanted the emissive color, this glow, to always be visible for them. So that's why I decided to go with this big kind of glow particle. Okay. And then we test and optimize. So this orb particle is only 559 vertices. It's actually really small, and I actually wind up blotting it down in the particle system. These are not very big on screen. The movement is not going to, it doesn't necessitate a whole bunch of vertices. We don't need that vertice density on the screen all the time. That's a lot of information that the GPU has to process that's just unnecessary. And particle count, especially for CPU particles. Each of these emitters, each of these different parts, they all are made up of modules. This tells the CPU how long each of these particles is supposed to live, what the color over lifetime is supposed to be. This is a lot of information that the CPU has to keep track of for every particle, every frame. So if it has to calculate more of these every frame is longer to calculate, we have less frames per second. So that's why it's really important to keep your particle count in mind. But the second reason is also our overdraw. So in this example, I just doubled the number of the big glow particles and the smoke particles. And it doesn't really look any different. It glows a little bit more, and that is nice. But we also have to think about, okay, it looks nice in this kind of gray background, but I don't know how it's going to look in-game, right? So it's not worth the amount of overdraw that we're getting. This is really bad, and it doesn't really gain us anything. So that's the reason why we go with this top one. And then, most important, you need to test your effects in context. Always be playing the games. See where these are going to be, how many of them are going to be on the screen with what other effects are going on. Does it make sense to the player? Does this communicate the gameplay effectively? And does it do it efficiently? Right. Thank you. Next up is Seung.
So we'll go retro right now. So my name is Seung Kim, and my role in the effects department is slightly different. So I'm a little bit technical, but not as technical as all the beautiful people over here. I'm more experienced in 2D animations, like a traditional to pixel to effects and all that stuff. So that task come down on me. So the UI concept, as a player, I should see first-person echo device that reinforces how I interface with an interactive object and how the UI is presented to me. So this is a concept was done by an amazing concept tip basically, whenever the character brings out a device, that'll actually form a UI in front of you. So this is basically when you pause a button, you go into inventory, and you can select all that stuff. So we need the presentation of how this applies. So some games will just have a regular UI and doesn't even really relay how they pop up and how this came about. We try to decide to have a narrative, like this device we have, that actually projecting this hologram on top of the player's screen, so you can, juggle your inventory and like your skills and all that stuff. So we need some kind of device that represent that. And we're looking into it. So like, what is this device? So everybody had an experience of these handheld devices. It could be like, small, little digital creatures, to like a Game Boy, or like a small, like a, DVD drive, or that your parents shove it to you when you're driving long distance or something, or the Tiger Electronics. So everybody's used to this. Like monochromatic, very handy, and it's, low light, and you have to look down on it when a car passes by with a little light or something. So we all experience that. So we want something like that. So our Gearbox concept team did a multiple variation. Some of them actually look like a Walkman. Some of them actually look like a, little Game Boy devices. Some of them actually look like a claptrap. And when it opens up, it shows a little screen there. And since the Borderland actually have many, many brand in our game itself, so we try to infuse that into the game devices as well. So if TDR made the devices, how is that going to look like? So on and so forth. And on top of it, so this is the final concept that we agree upon. And it's going to have a cartridges. So that's cartridges that you're going to be picking up throughout the game. So you'll be using that to listen to an echolog and listening to the story was told by this echolog. So on top of the screen, we will have some kind of visual device that it tells a story. It could be anything. It was just a single pixel frame of like an image or something, claptrap, or really lo-fi retro. So we had an opportunity to do some cool stuff. And this is the final device. Designed it really nice. And we have a multiple way to skin it later, so you can actually find the skins throughout the game. So this will be the device that we'll be looking at it a lot of times. Like whenever you pause and you go to inventory, you're going to be looking at it a lot. This is the first moment you actually get in the device. So you have a character looking at it, checking on it.
Slightly more powerful than the Echo 2, and twice as
So we wanted to create a little bit of opening boot up sequence of the device.
combustion. So they rebranded those as grenades.
So that was a booting sequence that I have to animate. And these are the menu mode. It's like inventory, backpack, rotating guns. And Mose is a gunner, and she also have the Big Mac. She could call off on, that's one of her skills. So her skill has to relay like what you see on the screen. So I depict the Big Mac shooting guns. So like my feature animation skill from all those years actually came along fine, and I could animate something really impactful and visually fun to watch it, look at it. So this will be the Guardian mode. So whenever you're into the Guardian rank mode, you can have it's like, just regular one screen of an image is not that cool to look at. So I put a little bit glow to it, like a little shine to it, that something relate to what it is. And it's fun to look at it too. But it still doesn't detract people's attention away from it. Something to ambient animation basically. This is for the menu, the mission log. Like whenever you find a mission, we have this diamond. So I actually animated diamond to be a little bit more shiny because it's diamond. And then echolog, the description was like we wanted some device that actually reflect what you're calling re-listening to somebody recorded. So it's like tape deck. I mean, 80s tape deck is like pretty much what we had. So I animated the tape deck and a little bit of equalizer going up and down. That was really fun to do. We have a Typhon log. That's another part of the game that you will be unlocking the story moment from all throughout the places that we're visiting. And concept art actually had some distortion on the image, so I actually emulate that. After I animated the whole thing, and I just added the grabbed all the the images and I shifted over a little bit and just one frame, and it actually created that shifting, the jittering motion. And some alien writing, pretty cool stuff. So they didn't really have any animation for it. I just come up with like how it's gonna light up. So I just animate something neat. So production-wise, this is the very beginning of the stage. So I use the Adobe Flash. This is before the Adobe Animate came out. And then I had to actually literally use a box, pixel box to actually animate, which is insane because you can't actually draw in Flash because it becomes a vector like smooth line. So I wanted little bit of like literally pixel. So I had to actually animate by pixel, which is like really a lot of work, and it's take a long time to do it. And on top of that, after I finish it, I have to export all the frames into the Adobe Photoshop, import them in, and then lay them out and make a sprite sheet, and then send it over to Unreal Engine. So a lot of process. And then Sprite came by. So Nick actually found a really awesome pixel program. He's like, hey, take a look at this program. So I take a look at it. It has like robust animation engine, and you can actually animate in exact pixel that you want to, and then you can output it out, sprite sheet like in the game, like anytime you want to. And then there's a preview window always up, so you can actually watch while you animate, keep changing. So this is a perfect. And then not only that, like a lot of people, indie developers who's actually doing a pixel animation or pixel art in a game, they're actually using this. So you can actually find this on Steam. So really reasonably, like super cheap. So I don't know why you guys not getting this. Just get it. And then we just ship it right into the Unreal Engine. It was perfect. So the task comes in. So something about our character, we have 4 distinct different Vault Hunters. So they all look different. They all have a different skills and functions and all that stuff. So I had to develop, whenever I animate something, I had to make 4 different kinds of each one. So there's the color-coded for like a Gunners, Siren, Beastmasters, and Operate. So I had to create 4 different kinds for each one. So the process. So this is the concept art done by one of our concept artists. So this is going to be the vending machine for the medical vending machine. So I wanted to like emulate that. So I grabbed the character. It's just a single art, and I redraw it like pixel. Before I go into pixel, I just grab a paper and then with a red pencil. Like I've been with the Disney, so I've been doing a lot of red pencil drawing. So going to the final pose, how am I going to get there? From where am I going to get there? So I need to loop it as well too. So at the beginning of the animation, and so key animation basically, key poses I guess, and then put the middle in between, like S curve, getting into this arc, to that arc. Yeah, I mean, you guys have the book here, so go get the Animated Survival Kit. It's a perfect book for that anybody. So go through that, and you'll be able to do this kind of animation perfectly. And then going through the sprite, I could either like import in the scan images and go by like clean up by pixel, and lay them out in different level, just like Photoshop or any other animation program does. And I can time it out. The important thing here is the pixel ratio, 120 by 64. That's the pixel ratio that I'm going with. The actual image is like that tiny. And I had to animate it that. And on top of it, the frame counts too. So I'm limited to like a power of 2 as well too. So either 16 or 32. I can't get any bigger than that. So this is the color version of it. So I need to start, end, and then loop. So it'll loop the animation going back and forth. And I added a little bit of effects of like heart flowing around and little glow and all that stuff. So it's pretty neat stuff. And then the layers keep adding and adding and adding. But everybody knows. But it's cool. Like no one's gonna see this. I'm like now you guys get to see it. But this is the process I go through. I'm sure if I scroll down, there's more layers too. So after I finish all this stuff, and I export it out to the sprite sheet. So the sprite actually have a function that you can export it out to whichever the format you want to. So power 2 is most important. That's what we need to do because like that's going to be optimize it for our game. So a lot of games have like huge texture sheets, and they're like sometimes 4K images and stuff. That actually is not going to help the game. I mean, it'll look really good, but it's not going to help the game run faster. And especially our device is going to be always in front of you, and your other friends playing, and they could pause it whenever you're playing, so they'll be looking at it, and that's going to add into more memory crunch and stuff. So we need to make it, that's why I did it 128 pixel by 64, to make it as small as possible. So the actual texture sheet for all the animation I did is 512 by 512. Some of them has alpha channel, some of them don't. Just export it as it is. And this is actually how the shader works. To put it, so I can't explain it for you guys. You have to just trust me. It worked really awesome. Nick came up with all this stuff to create this pixel look to reflect it right onto the game device. So we're actually like a game in the game. Weird. Anyway, so it'll be, it's a shader that Nick built, and it's like scaling to like a nearest neighbor. I mean, Photoshop has a nearest neighbor function whenever you scale down. So that's why if I do a power 2, it could scale up, double, and it look exactly the same. It's scaling in-game, basically. So this will be the final, how it looks in-game. So you can see actual pixel identical. And Nick actually put it in a little bit of like a scan line in there to actually add more cool look to it. We're actually going to ship it as like a grayscale. So if you like, people wanted like a Game Boy skin, but we're like, why not just full color? And then when I show the full color of these, and people are like, yeah, just ship it as color. And these are the character-specific assets I have done. So the up layer is the Beastmaster. So he have a little Ulimang just coming around. He's trying to pet him. He just runs away. So it like tells a little story, you know. It's still looping, so people still could enjoy if they want to, but if they don't have to, you know. It's just like randomly animated in the background. The skill have to mirror. It's like the task was like try to create something like a Pokemon battle. It's like, all right, task accepted. Challenge accepted. So I create some way to do so. So some of them I actually did it in a looping animation, but the UI team actually asked us to do the opening animation, pause, loop, and then exit animation. So I have to create separate the segment so it'll actually come in, stay, and leave. So that's like an old day, like a 2D pixel animation from Genesis and Super Nintendo days. I worked on Sega Genesis games, so I know how it works, so it worked perfect for me. Pocahontas, play that. So the quick change, same thing, using same asset. Since everything is a separate layer, so I could just copy the layer over, so I could reuse the same asset, just reanimate the characters around, so which is perfect. Like gun, same thing, I create a gun assets, and I could reuse them, reorient them, and do it wherever I want to, and then I could just animate however, whatever it's required to be. A lot of cool stuff. And these are like a non-character specific, so whatever the event happening, it just plays. So that's some cool, nifty stuff. So not all you see here actually get used in-game, but we actually gonna go to that part right now. So like, the 3 different type of vending machine, the ammo, and then, the medic, and then the gun, so you can see how they animate. A lot of fun doing that stuff. I think I was having more fun than anybody else. It's like, how do I make it funny, and just keep doing that. So.
Hello, traveler. Claptrap here to tell you all about our brand new Borderlands 3 Twitch extension. We're gonna change the streaming game, y'all! With the power of our brand new EchoCast technology, you won't have to ask streamers to share details about their loot and skills. Now you can directly inspect their equipped items and backpack at any time. Ooh, just look at all that juicy gear. And check this out! Drill down into every skill tree and slot an ability, then judge the crap out of the streamer's build. You know you want to. We are also bringing a new level of interactivity to Twitch streaming, with special events where you can win in-game loot just by tuning in. Link your Shift account to Twitch, then participate in interactive events like the rare chest events for the potential to win loot in Borderlands 3.
So
Winners are chosen at random, just like in real life. If you're one of them, your lucky haul will be sent directly to your in-game mailbox, because everyone needs more freaking loot! This is just a tantalizing taste of what's to come for our new Twitch extension. Be sure to link your Twitch and Shift accounts so you'll be ready for the big reveal. The official Borderlands 3 extension debuts on May 1st.
So he said it all. So my animation get used a totally different way as well possible. So it's like a user friendly, and then it's like a right format, and it's small enough and not big textures, so you can probably put it anywhere through. So those were the movie that you just saw is for the PC. But if you're actually watching streamers on your phone or something, it has to work as well too, since my image is small enough and then optimized enough, so you can probably push through. And these are the screenshots from the iPhone. So you can still do the same thing, watching streamer doing stuff, and you can affect him, or you can win the stuff as long as he's playing or whatever. So I don't know why you guys wouldn't, so this is awesome. So another opportunity was merchandise. So we get to use, so they actually obviously wanted to make an Echo device. So one of them is from a Spirit Halloween exclusive. It's like a $30 one. And the one next to it is a GameStop exclusive. That's like a $90 one. So of course, $90 one is like really rubbery feel, and it's like really fancy and lit up and everything, really cool. But the next one is cheaper, but still has a cool stuff. And they actually asked me to give them like 6 frames of like a random animation that I've done. So I did the logo animation with the electricity going through. This is like a very first of the game development time. And we didn't actually use this in the in-game at all. So it was like, okay, maybe we could use this one. And then they put that as a lenticular, and here it is. So how many people could walk around and say, hey, this is my animation. See, look at it. Show this to my mom, and it's like, what is that? But anyway, so I love toys, and I love the things related to merchandise and stuff. So I get to see some of my work actually put it into this stuff is amazing. And everything that you guys will be doing or will be doing actually turns out to be merchandise or T-shirts or movies or even sculptures and stuff. So it's just really cool stuff to see. And some of the comments. So after the game was released and people looking at this stuff, and this is the comments that I found it on Twitter, and Pat Garino, he's actually our UI team leader. He actually commented on my Facebook. He's like, it'll be cool to have 1 or 2 looping pixel animation on the device since it looks like a Game Boy. And I go like, yeah, we can probably handle that. And I end up doing over 100 steps. So thank you very much. And now I introduce Nick back on the stage.
Hey everybody, it's me again. I'm here to talk to you about our combat systems and guns, because I don't know how much Borderlands you played, but there's a lot of gun-related stuff in this game. So first I want to talk to you about the damage feedback system. This is something I'm particularly proud of. When we were first working on Borderlands 3, pretty much everything that we were doing, we based off of like, okay, well, what was successful about Borderlands 2? What was it that we loved? What did people remember? What were they talking about in anticipation of Borderlands 3? And that was everything, from like weapon effects, scopes, damage feedback, everything top to bottom. And one of the things that we had thought about was the way that we represented like directional damage and stuff, where damage sources were. So this might look familiar to some of you. It's like this is very similar to how it worked in previous games. This is actually all fake. I just made it for this presentation. So if you're like, where was that? Nowhere. Nick's desk. So personally, I've never been like super crazy about this presentation. For like anyone that's played our games before, there's a lot of flying enemies. You're doing 4-player co-op. Bullets are whizzing past you constantly. There's a bunch of different things attacking you at any point in time, and I don't feel like this gives you enough information. What you'd seen there, it's like, that's familiar, it's safe. We've seen it in a lot of other first-person shooters that we've played, and I feel like it's time to move past that. Doesn't help you with the flying enemies or any sense of verticality, and I feel like depending on what old first-person shooter you're playing, sometimes when someone would shoot you and they're behind you, what would happen is the whole screen would light up and it would look something like this, and it's like, great, did you get hit from 4 different places at once? Or like, I don't know, that's not useful to me. And this is kind of how that type of thing looked. And I'm like, it's cool. I think that we've seen it in a lot of different games. It's great. I'm like, but we can make this better. So I had this brainwave idea, which is like, what could be simpler than just like pointing at the thing that shot you? That seems pretty simple. And I think it's important when you're talking about game feel concepts or real-time visual effects for first-person shooters that you keep this sort of thing in mind, because we have a tendency to overcomplicate things while we're working on these. And so now I'm going to show you kind of where we landed with the 3-dimensional damage indicators. So you can see kind of where you get more information this way. It's like you're pointing directly at the attacker, you're getting blue for shield damage, red for health damage. There's never any question in your mind about where it is that you're being shot from, even when you have dozens of enemies in the same map and you're just like spinning in place, which is obviously not a normal gameplay scenario, guys. This is like for the presentation. Okay, give me a break. So weapon effects for 1 billion guns. There are 1 billion guns in Borderlands 3, and that is a very real number, and that always kind of shocks people. But when you know how the weapon system works, you can start to understand a little bit better how it is that we get to that count, right? We have a lot of different manufacturers, a lot of different elemental damage types. And at the outset of this game, we knew that we're going to end up with more guns than we've ever had in the past, and that we want to make more, better, and more varied visual effects for all of these weapons. So the person that was tapped for this nonsense was me. I think we're going to see if I'm correct here. Let's see my video. We'll see a little bit of those gun effects. We have Children of the Vault flamethrowers. Got some saw blades, basic muzzle flashes, a lot of scopes, ammo counters, grenade stuff. Some of the Maliwan weapons. And yeah, they got a charge time. Jacob's sniper rifle scope. Should have said something about like a gratuitous violence warning, sorry. That's my favorite. I like that Alice tracker grenade. Every time you use that, think of me. Show off some of the damage types and stuff in there too, of course. So, knowing that we have all these different damage types to support, knowing that you're going to have 4 cooperative players running around, that you're going to have all these enemies on screen, we had a lot of rules that I tried to put in place while I was working with our entire visual effects team to try and make it so that you could kind of like see through the chaos and figure out what it is that was going on, because there's a lot happening and there's just constant information being shoved in your face, whether it's like the weapon effects going off, the blood, loot flying everywhere. So a couple things that are important to me in first-person shooters. I think it's really important that you kind of like choose a portion of the screen to be your like screen safe space. It's not a real like strictly defined principle in any game that you'll work on. You'll think sometimes of like the area that like, oh, in different aspect ratios, maybe this gets cropped out or whatever. But for me, it's just like the area around the gun. You don't want to have a bunch of stuff happening right there. It's like anything between the barrel of the gun and the crosshair. You're trying to limit that as much as possible so that you can see what you're shooting at and like the results of you firing at something. Another thing is just trying to reinforce gameplay information. The different elemental damage types and stuff are key to playing this game. If you're any good at Borderlands, you know that it's like, okay, this guy's got a shield, you're like hitting him with the shock damage, and then you're switching over to incendiary if it's just like flesh underneath the shield. So we try to teach you, even with the visual effects, very quickly by keeping a common color language. And then this like seems really minor, but I've played so many first-person shooters at this point, and like I don't know if I'm fooling anybody today, but like I'm old, and any type of weapon presentation that you're doing, muzzle flashes, grenades, I think it's just important that you make this stuff large so that people notice it, bright so that it's eye-catching, and very fast so it's out of the way very quickly. So, a little bit about my texture workflow. This is actually the real Substance Designer setup for the pistol muzzle flash in Borderlands 3. This is the first time really that I fully adopted Substance Designer into my pipeline. Why Substance Designer? For any of you that have used it before, you know that it's a non-destructive workflow, which is super important because I'm not saying that it happened in the past, but like there were previous Borderlands games, and maybe sometimes a confused intern kid would spend way too much time painting the same muzzle flash texture over and over and over again, and he doesn't like the result, so he throws it out and he does it again. Thanks for still paying me, Gearbox. And with Substance Designer, it's non-destructive. I can make changes to the noise that I'm using to break up my individual masks, and just kind of like plug things in and out of there very quickly to get the look that I want without having to spend hours and hours doing so. And then furthermore, once I landed at a look that I liked, I was able to propagate that to many different weapon types very quickly. So that gives you an idea into like how that was done. And this is what it actually looks like. So this is the real pistol muzzle flash texture. And if you guys are like really wanting to get in there and start pulling these things apart pixel by pixel, I'm gonna repeat this again later, but I'm making sure that you get all the assets from our presentation at the end of the day, okay? Like I want you guys to be able to like go through this. So if you're like frantically scribbling notes in the back, stop it. Pistol muzzle flash texture, Samantha talked about this a little bit already. There's only 4 sub-images in here. This is because you're constantly trying to strike a balance between like getting slightly different shapes that aren't too unique and identifiable. You need them to be a little bit samey so that you don't just start seeing like kidney bean shaped muzzle flashes or something like that. That was always something that my old boss taught me to avoid. And also still being able to get some level of fidelity out there, because it's like there's some people that are playing the game in like 4K resolution, so you still need to accommodate a certain amount of res for a effect that's going off right in front of your face. Once we've kind of got the mask figured out, we're talking about the different colorization options. To keep the weapon damage types consistent as possible, I used gradients. And what you're seeing here, again, is a real asset from Borderlands 3, but it's actually the different gradients that we use for all the different damage types in the game. So there's never a question about making sure that you're like typing in the right numbers, you know, and goofing it up. You're going to get exactly the right elemental color each time for anything that we set up, every muzzle flash, every grenade explosion, etc. In addition to that, we actually layer in these detail masks. And the detail mask, my concept with that was just to have different damage types, like incendiary, where you expect there to be some secondary detritus inside of the muzzle flash. You want something that breaks up the shape that you recognize, but then we kind of limit its use to the damage types where it makes sense. So in the same way that we've done dissipation masks in the past to just kind of take a smoke texture, fade it out in a way that's a little bit better than straight alpha blending. Something like this is layered on top of the random muzzle flash, so that as you're doing dozens of trigger pulls back to back to back, not every effect looks exactly the same. It feels as different as it can while still pulling from the same pool of assets. And in addition to that, we randomized rotation for everything, because that's just free and we should do that. And then you put some bloom on it, and magically, AAA effects, boom, you're good to go. That's how I did it, and this is kind of what that looks like. I missed on purpose. So there's here's how your muzzle flashes work for Borderlands 3. Now, if you want something else in Borderlands 3 that is going to just make you think of like stuff that I contributed to this game, scopes are a big thing. There are a ton of these things. There's so many guns and so many scopes, and this took a lot of time. So let's talk about it. It might surprise you to know that with the exception of all some of the iron sights on some of the weapons in the game, that all of the scopes are actually visual effects assets. So this is something that fell to our department again. And this is a kind of tricky thing to figure out because much in the same vein of the Echo device stuff that Seung was talking about, trying to get a lot of different variety in here means that we have to add more and more and more textures to consoles that have a finite amount of memory. And the thing about our weapons is that you could be picking up any one at any time, and trying to store this in an efficient way was tricky. Here's what some other scopes look like. You saw the Jacobs full screen scope earlier. This is a Dahl SMG. And that's a Hyperion full screen scope. It's used for a couple different weapon types. And you see Atlas, Torg, Mallard one. Torg one might look familiar to people who played Borderlands 2. We tried to do a couple that were throwbacks. The Atlas stuff was all new craziness from the minds of our concept artists and just random stuff that I came up with, frankly. A big part of this game is the manufacturer visual theming. We know about the core art style, we know about the heavy inks, but in order to give players a better sense of agency over the guns that they're using, it's important that no two guns feel the same. You start to develop like brand loyalty for some of the guns. There's a lot of people that, you know, they really just prefer, like me, for example. I really like the Jacobs guns. They're super powerful. It rewards accuracy. And then, like, if you're just trying to get elemental damage, you just want to use Mallard one. These are the type of things that you're keeping in mind while you're playing. So I have a Gnomon exclusive for you. This scope right here looks kind of dirty, you know, and there's a lot of dirty looking surfaces in Borderlands games, but nobody's picked up on this in the public that I've seen. If they have, sorry, I missed it. I'm not on Reddit all day. The wear and the dirt all kind of come from rarity values of different guns. So early in the game, when you're picking up like really low quality weapons, you'll actually find weapon scopes that have like a crack going through them and stuff like that, and that's like obvious enough. But the wear and the dirt actually kind of like fade away over time. As you get better and better quality weapons, you'll find that the glass is more pristine. So tell your friends and impress them. Other stuff that we add in here, we have a lot of like line of sight indicators, ammo counters, just random things to like keep you visually interested while you're aiming at people, and to also just like give you a little bit better gameplay feedback. Again, it's those game feel concepts. So now I'd like to show you a couple of the manufacturers' scopes and what they look like, just a small like selection of each. So this is Atlas. This is pretty cool. I think these are probably my favorite, which is why they ended up at the start. Got the COV, Children of the Vault. In Borderlands 2, there were actually assault rifles that had like a bottle on the scope, and it was actually something that everybody on the Borderlands 2 team really, really wanted to do, was have it to where you actually looked through that bottle. And nobody tasked this to me, nobody asked for it, but it was very important to me that we make sure that you actually do get a chance to look through that bottle scope. So that's what that second image is. There's a Dahl. Dahl is very much based off of like United States military weapons, that sort of thing. Hyperion, you know, Hyperion was like the villain in Borderlands 2, right? So everything's yellow and looks like the letter H. Jacobs is very old-timey, like kind of way fancier than actual Wild West weaponry is, but it kind of evokes that same thing. You have a lot of the like filigree details, stuff like that. That first one is actually Edison bulb scope. That was another really weird one that we wanted to try. I think it was in Borderlands 2 concepts, and we're like, no, bring that back. Let's do it for real. Maliwan, it's just like future tech. Tedior, my thing with TD Wars is always like it's a disposable weapon, right? So you try to make everything very angular, very kind of boxy. Torg's about explosions. It made me think a lot of missile systems, flight path monitors on jet fighters, stuff like that. So that's kind of how those landed. Vladov is more kind of like a very stylized version of like Russian military weapons, that sort of thing. And then here's what I was talking about with the glass. Check it out. Nick was telling the truth. Yeah. Gets all pristine and stuff. And you can try that on your own if you play Borderlands 3. There's some of these other secondary bits of information I was talking about, having a shield meter, ammo counter. There's a bunch of different stuff for all these different weapons. And if you play as Moze at all, you know, like, there's like a compass in there too. Just weird stuff. I kind of like having that little bonus information. Line of sight indicators, we turn the scope red when you highlight somebody. Turns green if it's a friendly too, so you know that like, hey, don't shoot him, that's Claptrap. So what does all that look like together?
Oh, yeah! Oh! Ooh.
All right, so thank you. I appreciate that. Stuff's really hard. And now I'd like to bring up Caitlyn Trout, talk about our destruction pipeline.
So the black sheep of the group, tech artist. So yeah, I was destruction lead on Borderlands 3. What? And I'm just going to show you just a few quick examples of sort of the destruction that we implemented for game. So, you know, everything from big spectacle bosses, spawning events, run things over, cover, lootables, more cover, things exploding, going everywhere. Spoilers. Cinematics. Oh god. All right. So I'm just going to start off with, these are the tools I used. This is my pipeline. So I did a lot of my fracturing in Houdini effects. And then everything was brought into Unreal, and we used the NVIDIA Apex physics engine. So that's what we had. Bam. It's my first time using any of those things. So, hey.
Caitlyn, I want to destroy something.
Oh my god, I want to help you destroy something so bad. What is it? All right, so we're gonna, I'm gonna ask you a series of questions. When we want to break something, we broke things into two different categories. The questions generally were, is it used in gameplay? Is it everywhere in all different maps? Do you want it to break a very specific way? And given those answers, I would break it into these two categories. We've got real-time physics, so again, using the physics engine, things that break as part of gameplay, and then we have pre-simulated events, right? So I sim it in Houdini, we bring in the cached animation, we play it, that's what you saw at the end. Boom, boom, boom. So say you're like, no, I want it to spawn loot, I want it to affect gameplay. Okay, cool, well, that tells me that we're gonna build it with physics. Math. We're gonna start the process off in Houdini. So I'm gonna design the fracture. This is our crate. How many pieces does it break into? What's it made out of? How many chunks can I get away with? You know, because everything I want it to explode. And in this case, I used a number of different procedural tools. Either I'm using the Voronoi sort of fracturing, or I'm either hand drawing all the fracture lines with booleans and cutting through it and making all the pieces and getting something like this. Bam. Hey, I'm a technical artist. Sometimes you write some code. Woo! In this case, this is a little bit of code I wrote in Python for Houdini just because we had no ability to parent chunks to smaller chunks so that they would know, like, this part breaks, and then it breaks into smaller pieces. How do we do that? Well, I could have done this all by hand. That seems lame. I'm going to write a code that does it as part of an export process. So we had different support depths in PhysX, right, in Apex. So yeah, think of it as this piece of the wall breaks into these pieces. But yeah, we had to write a lot of things to custom write data and custom read data for Unreal. Boom. All right, so here it is in Unreal. I'm double checking the collision, because again, this is a physics simulation, meaning the collision has to be pretty accurate, otherwise you're gonna get that fun physics spawned and other physics bug and flies into things, which can be fun, but I don't want that. That's you see me pulling my hair out in the background. No. And this is where we set up all of the physics settings in Apex inside Unreal. I'm not going to go through all that, but the physics settings were things like which parts support other parts. If I break out the base, does everything fall? That kind of stuff. All right, so we're a cooperative game. We have a lot of cooperative features, so that meant we had to start thinking about things like replication. And so for gameplay, we broke all of our destruction down into sort of 3 main categories. Farthest to the left, we have aesthetic destruction. It's a type of thing that other players don't really need to know about. It's like, yeah, I broke a bottle, it's cool. Like, you can see it, and you can break as many bottles as you want. All your connected friends won't see it, right? And this is to save on data that we send over the network. This is all thinking about real time. We don't need to know that. That doesn't affect gameplay. That doesn't affect the mission state or anything like that. Next up, we have gameplay only relevant. So pretty much all of our cover falls in this category. It's like, well, this is cool. It fractures, and it is big enough that it affects navigation. But the fracture itself is still pretty aesthetic, right? It doesn't affect, how we can path around. The collision really doesn't update that much. It's just cool. So that's data our friends don't need to know about. And then finally, we have our lootable. We got the crate. It's network relevant. Why? It drops loot. It affects gameplay. Its state changes how we path around the level. So everyone needs to know about that. So that's how it ends up in our network relevant state. Yeah. Whoa. All right, well, that's cool. That's all, in-game affecting gameplay, physics destruction that's, simulated in real time. Someone might come in, maybe a Nick, and they're like, hey, so there's this giant statue and it crumbles, and it's like, we want it to crumble this way, and here's how it's set up. It's a shot, it's an animation. So I'm gonna cache it. I'm gonna take it in Houdini, I'm gonna simulate it, and then I'm gonna bring it back into Unreal. So it starts off much the same process. I was like, how many pieces can I get away with? I want to break it a lot. So and because it is pre-simulated, I'm not calculating it in real time, I can get away with a little more, right? The big costs in game are more memory and less performance. So yeah, how many chunks does it break into? In this case, I wanted it to be like the super heavy chunks because the scale doesn't really do it justice. It's a huge, huge asset in game. So I wanted this sort of really heavy falling, the legs crumbling out beneath it. And the big difference, of course, is I'm simulating it ahead of time, so I set up the support structure here in Houdini, not using Apex. So I'm using a glue constraint network, which you can think of as, if anybody who's used Houdini, that might be familiar, but if you haven't, glue constraints are literally what they sound like, polylines that glue pieces together. And then I'm animating their destruction. Bam. All right, so we got this really cool simulation in Houdini, but it's not in the game. How do we play that animation? How do we take that cache data and get it into the game? In this case, we landed on a vertex animated texture solution. Rather than taking that animation and baking it to bones, right, which is you probably have seen in the past, and it's still an option because most game engines support skeletal meshes, and probably will for the end of time. That's always a way to do it, and that's how people have done it in the past. However, we used a purely material driven solution for our cached animation. So the best way to break this down is like literally position and rotation data. You can see number of pieces by number of frames. This is actually the animation data from that simulation you just saw. And we use our own kind of, like, we started with Side Effects' solution for cooking all that information out, and then I kind of changed it some for what we needed. But yeah. Well, okay, so we wrote the data. Now we got to read the data. Here's the material function that I wrote to drive all of that animation in the vertex shader. So it's being updated. So it's implemented in our masters, right? It has to work with a variety of different materials from different artists. Oftentimes I would get a mesh, they're like, you just break this, right? You could just break this. And I'm like, yeah, of course it could, and then, but then we had to have a very global solution to make that work. So yeah. Keep it simple, material parameters. So I wanted to hand designers, effects artists, any artists, a very simple control scheme. To play the whole animation, you take that one parameter and you scale it 0 to 1. That's it. That's all I wanted them to do. It's like, that's all you gotta put in your game, put in your level. And all the designers are like, oh, thank goodness. They don't have to look at my spaghetti code in my material and try to figure out what I was doing. It's like, no, just keep it simple. Here's the parameter, you got it. Bam. So I'm just going to play. This is sort of the process from start to finish for that that same thing, where it's like, oh, I kind of painted where I wanted the different concentration of chunks to be. You can see it all together. It fissures on up the side of the mesh. Constraints are being deleted. It falls. This is in Houdini. But Unreal. And you'll notice that it's falling through the floor because this is a map-specific simulation, right? So it won't work globally. It'll only work in that particular case where I simulated it. And here's the actual map. Cinematic. So yeah, that's some fun destruction. All right. Then we're going to bring Nick back up. Up and down, up and down, up and down.
All right, so a little bit of a refresher on our goals for Borderlands 3, what we were trying to do, try to improve the feel of the combat, hit a higher level of visual polish, inject some stylization in there. You saw that with the Echo device, you saw it with the Guardians for sure, and I hope you felt that you saw that with some of the weapon effects too. And want to hit all these things while still making this feel like a Borderlands game, because it's ultimately a sequel at the end of the day, right? How do I feel about it? I feel that our guns are snappier, more impactful, better. Obviously, the Maliwan Army, Guardian Army, they have more stylized visual effects. And something else we haven't talked about a whole ton, we did 5,280 particle systems for this game. That's a record for Gearbox. And I would hazard a guess it's a record for many companies, but we are really proud of the work that we put together for this, and it means a lot to all of us to be here today talking to you guys about this stuff. These are some of my favorite game developers, and really appreciate you giving us the chance to talk about this stuff. We tried some new stuff too. You saw most of this today, the Houdini destruction workflow. Some of our explosion flipbooks that you saw today, it's like that was generated in Houdini as well. We were doing team-wide effects critiques about every 2 weeks to just try and like keep our skills fresh and show people the different techniques that we've all kind of picked up that we wanted to share with each other. I hear people say all the time how competitive it is to be in video games, but inside of our office, it's very important that we have a cooperative environment and that we train each other up and we sharpen each other. I believe in that very firmly. And then also close overlap of tech art and effects departments. Obviously, Caitlyn had to like ride on a plane with us to get here, so like we get along. It's good. So don't freak out. This is a lot of text. I'm giving you the slides. Remember that. You don't need to write this stuff down right now, but we have some recommended reading for you. If you're interested in real-time VFX, you imagine yourself working in this type of game in the future, we have a lot of things that we wanted to recommend to you. We have the ArtStation pages of various artists. Our lead technical artist, Ryan Smith, has an excellent blog, overdraw.xyz. I bet if some of you guys have ever Googled anything tech art related, you've probably stumbled upon something he wrote, because he's been doing it for a long time. We got a handful of other resources that we really like. some books. I don't know if you guys have heard of books. Books are pretty cool. Kind of underrated these days, but you should check these out. They're pretty good if you just want to learn about somewhere of our personal development philosophies come from. And really, other than that, that's about it. We're going to start taking questions now, and I do ask ahead of time that you realize that there are some questions we just can't answer because we're not authorized to or whatever. But yeah. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
All right. Thanks so much, Nicholas. I appreciate that.
I know. Thank
All
you.
right. You ready for some Q&A?
Oh, okay. Hi, Seung.
All right.
I'm sorry. I know Seung because I worked with him at NSpace for years, so I'm very excited.
You're right.
But my questions are for everybody else. I'm a senior tech artist at my studio, and I do lots and lots of shader building and lots of particle effects. And I'm constantly getting very politely yelled at by my engineers to rewrite all my node-based shaders, in C# and HLSL to reduce draw calls and to reduce overhead. Do you guys have that same problem at Gearbox, or do you get to say, no, we're going to use node-based in Unreal, and we're going to do it this way because this works? And are you hitting those draw call boundaries and RAM boundaries where you can't get away with building these big node-based shaders? They work well for prototyping, but not well for the final build.
You want to answer or you want me to? Everyone's looking my direction, so I guess it's on me. Yes, we have the same problem in that people generate really expensive and stupid shaders, and we have to get rid of them. But no, we never really have to boil it down to the HLSL. Most of the people that we have writing shaders aren't actually doing it in HLSL. They'll have a little bit of experience doing it. Unreal is already doing that under the hood, and generally for us, it's just a matter of you should be able to get it correct in the GUI. And the tech art team is actually responsible for helping show us where the boundaries are. So yes and no.
Nice. All right. We have another question. We got one somewhere.
Don't be shy now.
Don't be shy at all, everybody. Not all at once.
Someone in the back.
We have scared everybody in this room.
Mike? So I wonder, because if I'm not mistaken, the game is done in Unreal 4, right? During the development, how heavy is the customization to the engine that you guys have done? How much do you guys have to work with the engineers that, hey, this is now, something I want to do, but I can't get it out of the box from Unreal Engine, and then so you just have to customize it?
It's basically everything. Pretty much every gameplay feature you can think of, with very few exceptions, required custom code in Borderlands 3. And we have a huge and fantastic engineering team, and they are very patient with me.
All right, thank you.
All right. We have another question right back here.
Wow, this is weird. Are you selling these? Really cool. Okay. For someone who's trying to get into visual effects and everything like that, besides get good, what are some tips for learning Houdini and everything like that?
I kind of want Samantha to answer this question because she was a fairly recent hire.
I don't know much about specifically with Houdini. I made some explosion simulations with it, but a lot of my work was mostly in Cascade. I feel like learning the animation principles is really important. Getting those kind of software agnostic skills are really important. You can look at different particle systems from the Unreal Asset Store, or if you're working in Houdini, that's a lot of where I started, was kind of breaking those apart and piecing them together and playing around with a lot of the different modules to get different effects. Learning color theory or 2D design, really helpful. I know there are some videos on Unreal that go or on their YouTube that go through like the Cascade basics. But yeah, that's probably about all I have as far as like Unreal goes.
Or watch this.
Yeah, watch this presentation a couple times. Definitely buy every book that we listed and visit all those websites.
Well, I would say for learning Houdini, because it's a huge program and there's a lot to do in it, just have something very specific you want to do and just start from there, because it can get really overwhelming. I remember opening it and being like, what? You know, like, what does this even do? And fortunately for me, I had like something very specific. It's like, oh, I just want to break stuff, destruction over and over and over again, and that was like a great jumping off point to other systems. So just like pick a thing and just try to solve a specific problem, you know? Because yeah, it's kind of a steep learning curve, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Does that also include the spaghetti code?
Spaghetti code.
Yeah.
It's like that's how materials sometimes look.
Yeah, my materials do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I think we have another question right over here, don't we? All right. Right here, we've got one.
Hi guys, thanks for coming out. I just had a general question. Do you guys like play your own games like once it comes out, or is it just that kind of thing where like you've been slaving away at this like 24/7, or just like I don't even want to look at this, I'm just get it away from me?
So, yeah, if you play with me, you're just going to see me running around and shooting everything it destroys, because I'm just like, is this still working? It's good. Okay, this is working. And like I'm just testing it. But yeah, I've been playing with my friends online, and they're all just super excited. It's a great cooperative game, so it's perfect for reconnecting.
For me, you'll be seeing me just keep looking at the Echo device. Keep roaming around. What is
Get
he
out of
doing?
menus.
Yeah, I was really excited to play with my husband, so we played through the whole campaign and co-op. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think we always try, especially this group that we have here today, like really tries to just like always play through our own stuff. But yeah, we have a tendency to kind of hone in on our own content, and I'm just like doing scopes over and over again and be like, no, it's not perfect.
And it's just like just a little follow-up question. Like usually when you're playing it, do you ever like run into glitches or like some kind of like you falling through the floor, or like something's not right? You're like, oh shoot, I got to fix that. Or
And anything that we run into, we're always super upset. Like you can't even imagine like how upset we get with any tiny things that people don't even like notice, and we're just like, no. It's the worst. Go to Reddit, no one's talking about it, and you're still just like simmering.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah.
Nice. Now, definitely raise your hand high if you have a question, and we'll get to you. We only have a limited time right here in the back and in the front, either way.
All right, I'm going to do you, and then you will be next.
Sure.
Right.
I had an animation question. So I noticed that for Caitlyn, the animation you made in Houdini, and then you created that whole little UI so it would be really easy for them to handle for when they were actually putting it into the game. Is that like kind of a thing that's expected for like all VFX and stuff like that? Is that like a very standard game thing where you kind of like design it so that it's like in all the interface and stuff as the VFX animator, so that other people can then use it really easily? Or is that something you do, or is that kind of expected? I'm just curious.
I mean, no one told me to, but it's one of those things where I've built enough tools for artists, and that's been a lot of my background, and I always want something to be as consumable as possible really early on, because there's a lot going on in development. A million things are flying by, and you don't want to have to go by someone's desk and be like, oh, by the way, you have to hit this switch and make sure to turn that all the way up, and oh, don't do that, and you, like, no, that's not helpful because the pipeline's going so fast. In this case, it was like, yeah, okay, I know exactly the designer who's going to implement this, and I know what systems he's used to using. He's going to understand this really easily. And it's, yeah, that's just I think that's just good tools design. And it's always important to think about who else in the pipeline is going to be looking at your work. It also guarantees that that stuff's going to make it in the game. You know what I mean? If you design something really super complicated, and you're like, look at the Swiss Army knife that does a million things, and you're like, cool, but I just needed the corkscrew. You know, like, they're not going to use it, right? Because they don't understand it, and then it's just going to get thrown out, you know, because people don't have time to unravel that. You know what I mean? So.
Cool.
Nice, nice. Then we have a question right back here.
Hello. How does optimization change in VR?
Everything's harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just give me a little bit more detail.
The frame rate's required, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're rendering everything twice, and a lot of people would be very wise to compare it to like split screen development. It's like you're going to be drawing everything twice, so you have to cut everything down as much as you possibly can.
Right, and the frame rate has to be like much better because your eyes, it makes you sick if you're looking at something like that close.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I actually had the pleasure of helping out on Borderlands 2 VR, and that was the first virtual reality game that I'd really worked on. And that was an interesting experience because it totally changes the way that you have to think about these things, especially with the very nature of half the stuff we showed you where, you know, visual effects are still very much these image planes or cards that we're throwing a texture onto, right? And so trying to get that sense of volume can be very difficult.
Nice. All right, raise your hand really high if you have a question. We have limited time. And right here.
Hi. So I'm wondering, what was each of your background on art and visual effects? Like, how'd you get into it, and if you had any educational background for it, how did you get where you are right now?
Start with Samantha, and let's just go all the way down.
I actually went into a animation and gaming program at Utah Valley University. I originally wanted to do design, and I wound up doing that on Dub Wars for a few years. Towards the end of the project, we needed visual effects, and I wound up designing a lot of the weapons anyway, so I knew their behavior. So I made a whole bunch of lasers and explosions, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. I really liked doing art and stuff before. I've been drawing my whole life. Something I really enjoyed doing. And this is kind of a perfect, combination of those things. So I wound up doing a lot of effects for that. And then after that, I did a lot of freelance work and wound up applying to Gearbox. And here we are today.
It's really long, I don't know. So I went to SVA, illustration major. During the illustration major, we had a visit from Walt Disney Feature Animation. They were looking for interns for summers and winters and stuff. So I applied and I got in. Only thing they were looking for is a figure drawing, so no animation. I have no animation background. Only thing I had a figure drawing. And then that's what they're only looking for. So, okay, I submitted, and that's how my career started. So from Disney, for 6 years, I was a part of the feature animation, doing a lot of cleanup animations. And on top of it, I was interested in the video game, so the video game department was coming up in the feature animation Florida as well. So they're working on Aladdin when I was an internship, and then they were working on Lion King, Genesis Lion King. So I was helping them play the game because they couldn't finish any one level. So I sat down and played the whole game for them. So they video recorded the whole thing. And because back then it was on a ROM chip, they send it to you in a little FedEx package. So that's how they play it. And after that, the department head wanted to ask me if you want to be part of the game team, and on top of it, you can work in the feature animation. Just like that, kill two birds with one stone. So from then on, my career continued forward, and I was always interested in digital media, CG graphics, computer graphics, and all that stuff. So I was in doing Alias Wavefront back then. Before Maya was ever born, Softimage. I was in a Disney CG internship on top of it. So regular internship and CG internship, and moving on to the CG realm as well. And after Disney closed down, I was continue pushing forward my CG modeling and stuff. Like EA got hired to do the NASCAR, the track for Miami Homestead, like a super long track, and so I had to model the whole thing, and we just continue moving forward. And in space, I got a chance to work on a lot of cool projects. And one of the projects that I had to work on was like Hannah Montana, the movie project. So I was art director, so it was an awesome feature. My daughters were just right; they were like 6 and 8, so like they enjoy whatever they see on the screen, and your dad's working on a video game, and I got a chance to meet Hannah Montana, which is awesome, and good Disney connection actually definitely helped me through getting more clients and all that stuff, and continuing moving forward. I had an opportunity, somebody who used to work with N-Space called me up, there's a game that we're working on, it really requires some hand-drawn effects, which was Battleborn. So she asked me if I'd be able to do hand-drawn effects. It's like, sure, and they gave me a test to do, so I did 3, and ended up they actually wanted 1, I did the 3 anyway, and I got a call next day, and came to Gearbox and then got hired and worked on Battleborn, and ever since I've been in Gearbox for 6 years.
So my background was originally in graphic design, so I was a graphic designer for a few years, and then I went back to school, like I said, at the Florida Interactive Entertainment Academy, and I got my master's in specifically like game development, and in my case it was game art, but then I kind of niched into technical art there. That was the first time I'd ever coded anything, was in my master's degree program. And it was just one of those things where like it just was a really great fit because I would start typing just a little bit of code and suddenly you're this wizard and all the other artists are like, whoa, what is that? It's arcane language that only I can interpret. Something, you know what I mean? Like a friend of mine, Ed, he's one of our graphics engineers. He's actually the effects engineer. He said, and I think it's really accurate, is like code is the closest thing to magic you'll ever do. And I was like, it's actually very true. And so while at school, I got offered an internship at EA Tiburon because it was right there in Orlando. That's where my school was.
Orlando.
Woo. And that's where I got introduced to like larger scale AAA pipelines, tools programming. That's what I did for them while I was on the Madden team. And then I applied for Gearbox, and they were like, "Hey,
cool,
one job." I was like, "Yes."
Yeah, mine's real short. I was just goofing off rotoscoping lightsaber videos at home, and then when I got the internship to work on Borderlands, it was just like we desperately need people to make weapon effects, and we don't have anybody. Like the birth of the effects team was during Borderlands 1, so there was an opportunity, and I'd found myself wasting a lot of time looking at smoke sprites on my own, like GarageBand effort games before, and that was pretty much it.
Nice. All right, raise your hand up high. We got a question right here. And definitely be thinking of more questions because like I say, we have limited time and they're all the way here from Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Yeah.
So.
Hello. Games have changed a lot over the past like 20, 30 years. I'm wondering what you guys think the future of games is and where the future of VFX for games is going and how we as students should look out for that and what we should be learning.
So how to kind of like shape what you're focusing on now so that you're kind of ready. Is that the question? Yeah. Okay. I have very old ideas. One of you guys should answer.
Well, I'm kind of one of those people who still thinks that like great art's still great art. One reason I wanted to go to Gearbox was because they did stylized games that I thought would hold up forever. You kind of pick it up 10 years later and you're like, yeah, okay, well this was never intended to be hyper realism. This was a stylization, something really hand brushed, hand done art. I don't know, I feel like art's still gonna be important, good art's good art. There's,
So my theory on this thing is regular practical effect that you see it in just realistic shooting games, it's real. So when you see it, you know it's real, but there's nothing special about it. It's just explosion is explosion. You can all see it happening. But stylized effect is really hard to do, and you have to see like who else done it before. You have to figure out, has this done before? Who is using is it Riot, is it Blizzard, or Borderlands, whatever. So like, I think stylized effects are really, really hard to do, and that's why people start to like steer away from it. But I think if you have a both principle of it, if you actually do a practical effects, learning how the explosion happens in real life and animation and all that stuff. Study that for sure. And on top of it, if you have a stylized effect, to have a sub kind of thing, like, so okay, I could take this and make it into this way because I could add my elementary, something into it, my personal stuff into it, stylization. So that comes in really handy too, and that actually brought, like, Samantha actually, like there are a lot of people sending same explosion, same thing that you see in a YouTube video tutorial, and people look at the YouTube video, okay, I could do the same thing, and they think that's done and send it us, and we're like, we have thousands of people doing the same thing. How can you make yourself more representative? And Samantha come along, and she has done all that stuff, but she was doing multiple different effects on top of it. Yeah. So many diverse, and it's like when we looked at it, it's like she has so much. She has done so much, and then it has her. We saw her principle, all the natural principle of the explosion and all that stuff, and then on top of it, she just layered and layered, and it just looks amazing. So that's how I see you should be prepared for it.
Yeah. That's a great question. Who else? Right up here. Oh, we've got two back to back.
Whoa. It's flowing in now.
It's starting to flow now, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, right
Getting
here.
comfortable, loosening up.
That's great. All right.
This is so weird. Well, Borderlands 1, 2, and the pre-sequel had a very heavy inking style with the subtle change from 2 to 3 in terms of like art and inking. Was that a result of Unreal 4, or was that a ground up stylistic change?
That was actually a very deliberate choice by the art director, Scott Kester. That was something that we wanted to address for this game, and for this is the first time where like natively the game is running in 1080p. On last gen consoles, it would have been like 720p, right? And there had been some commentary internally where we were worried that the ink sometimes got in the way of other details that we were painting for the characters. So it's deliberately thinner this time around.
Cool. Let's get this next question right here.
Hi. My question is about compression. When it comes to compressing a game like a few years ago when Borderlands 2 was ported to the PS Vita, and if somehow in the future Borderlands 3 was ported to, let's say, the Nintendo Switch, when you're transferring a game like this to a different hardware with where the graphical capacity and the memory is a lot more limited, how do you work on that? Do you work everything from the ground up, or do you take what you have and just strip off as much as you can?
Do you want to answer? You want me to?
You're the one who just did the VR port and everything, so
yeah,
good.
Good point. Dang it. It's really difficult because at a basic level, we tend to have content people, artists, designers, look at everything that existed in a game, and we kind of had, I can give you an example that starts from the opposite perspective, which is when you're doing remasters, and now you are less restrained. We kind of look at what the original source art was authored in, and if we have higher resolution stuff to take advantage of, then we can start utilizing that. And in the reverse direction, with something like the Vita port or something like that, you're basically at a baseline knowing that like you've only got so much memory. So a lot of these things we're talking about with texture memory today, sizes of textures, how things are crammed into the memory, frankly, you have to just be willing to make sacrifices. And usually what dictates the release of something like this to one platform or another is just whether or not it even can fit in the first place.
Great. That's a great question. All right, we've got another one up front, and then we've got a couple in the back, so either or.
Hello? Okay, great. So my question is about destruction, and mainly you showed some pre-rendered things, so some things don't have to be affected real time. The question would be, how do you deal with pieces that need to remain on the ground after the animation plays? So you still have to have collision, so you can't really use vertex maps for that.
Right. Well, depending on the transition, so for that one, it was a cinematic, so we can control where what the player's looking at when we can swap things in and out. So it's generally sort of like, look over here, and then while we set change, if it's something that we're really worried that collision is going to be affected in the play space, that we can literally just swap in like a mesh with collision in the background while you're not looking. And that's what cinematics allow us to do, because again, your camera's always here. Yeah, I mean, that's the big anytime you're doing anything pre-canned, the big restriction is, is the collision of the game, right? So that's why a lot of it is all driven real time in physics. So I hope that answers the question.
Nice. We've got another question right up front. And then be thinking about who is next, because we've got limited time and we're starting to close out.
Hi, I've got a question for Nick. Being a director, what do you feel like is the most challenging part of your job, and what do you feel like is the most rewarding part?
Excellent question, let me tell you. I think the most challenging part of my job is kind of twofold. One is like having done this for a number of years and worked on previous Borderlands games, especially going back to the first one, where it felt almost like a very indie effort. The team was way smaller. You had a lot more people wearing multiple hats. The company has grown quite a bit since that point. It's training yourself to not just jump on everything that pops up, because you're a human being and you need to go home at a decent time, especially if you're married. It's very important that you are taking time to yourself to rest and recuperate, because no matter how good you think you are at, spending a bunch of time and you care so much about this one thing, it's like you do get drained and your art quality suffers. The other thing would just be that sometimes there can be egos. We all have this idea that like our idea is the best, and sometimes you need to be willing to yield to other people. You need to be able to see it from a different point of view. As far as what's the most rewarding, I would say that, like, especially the people that we have here today, is like these are some of my favorite game developers that I've worked with at any point in time and on any project. These are people that care a lot. Not everybody volunteers to go hang out at schools or anything like that. These people are very opinionated, and they're fiercely talented individuals, and it's my great pleasure to work with them every day.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. There's nothing better than a great team, because out of a great team and that camaraderie comes a stellar project, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I'll say too, like if you're dreading group work while you're here in school, and you're just like, can't wait till I'm done with school, I got news for you. You're not getting away from it. This is your reality.
It's all group projects.
Yeah.
Every single day.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Who has the next question? All right, here. Right here we go. Raise your hand high. Yeah, there you go.
Take the cube.
Yes, hi there. I just wanted to say I love all your games, all the sequels. I played the hell out of all of them. One thing I'm really excited about for this new game is the destructibility of the environments and stuff. I feel like that's something people have been wanting for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Why were you guys able to pull it off, and why do we have to wait so long for that to be a part of the games?
We're waiting for Caitlyn.
Yeah, we needed Caitlyn.
Why were we able to pull it off this time? It's like Caitlyn didn't sleep a lot. And so like, yeah, no, it was just sort of like a concerted effort by a couple people at the studio who were just like, we need to build this. And I was like, I won't break it, let's do it, and then like, is one of those examples of me going to our creative director and just being like, I don't know who's in charge of this. He's like, you are. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Cool, this is mine now. And then like just a concerted effort for, learning the technology constantly, like building the systems from the ground up. We had never done it before. As to why we hadn't done it in the past, I don't know. Like there's lots of features and things. This is definitely a high polished feature. While it's cool, it doesn't necessarily completely revolutionize the gameplay. It's just one of those things I was like, well, but we shoot a lot of guns. Wouldn't it be cool if things blew up more? Like in Borderlands of all series, it makes the most sense to add this feature.
Or drive through the cactus.
Or driving through things. Yeah, no, that's also a lot of fun. So yeah, how it happened this time was just a small group of people were like, we're gonna make it happen, and then we built it, and then we just stuck with it, and we're super like, here's what we're gonna break, and here's the things, and just concerted effort.
Sure. Yeah.
Nice. Well, we love it. So
I like it.
Thank you.
Who's got the next question? Right up here, right up front.
Hi, I was just wondering what everyone's favorite brand of gun is in Borderlands.
Brand of gun?
Yeah, like TDO or Malawan.
Ah, that's good.
Oh, I spoiled mine already. Sorry. It's Jacobs for me.
Yeah, no, same. I always liked the kick, and there was something about it and it was always the thing that made the destructibles blow up the best. So I was always like, yes. So that was the thing I tested a lot with.
I like torque because you can shoot the bullet and run away and hide, and you can see them blow them up later.
I wound up using Jacobs a lot too. I like the accuracy.
Wow, we did not plan this before.
I know, but I also like the Malawan a lot too,
really like
especially
the
for like
effects,
the effects and stuff. Yeah.
Cool.
That's great. Who's got the next question? Oh, right over here.
Wow, this is a big turnout.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, you guys are very popular.
I think people like this game, dude. Like, it's gonna be good.
Hello. This kind of goes back to one of the other topics, which was about if you guys play the games yourself and if you see a bug or something, do you guys have control over being able to just go in and fix it, or is there like a hierarchy that you have to go through for approvals? Like once the game is released, as far as like budget and like what you can do and what you can't do. Like, do you have limitations of what you can do if you see something? Because I know certain studios have like a hierarchy where if something is wrong, you can't just go in and change it. So I'm just kind of curious, as for your studio, where you guys stand.
I mean, it's strictly limited to like the jurisdiction of those bugs, right? It's just a matter of like whether or not we have the capability to fix that stuff, and kind of like when we're doing another content drop, stuff like that. There's technical limitations on it, but I wouldn't say that there's anything with like the management structure or anything that prevents us from making those changes. It just depends of like, does somebody have the time? Is it something that actually can be fixed? That sort of thing.
All right, think long and hard. We're going to wrap it up with the next 3 or 4 questions, and then we're going to have closing statements from our amazing team here from Borderlands 3. All right, you have a question right here?
Oh, hi again. So I'm kind of going back to this question where like what your favorite weapon type is, just like what's your favorite character to play in the game?
Ooh.
It's Moe's for me.
So no, Amara's melee build is the most fun. I love running around and punching things.
Beastmaster. 'Cause I got pet the dog, and I designed the heart coming off of it. Because like they wanted a heart, it's like that's boring. This is boring. I'm gonna put a spike on it.
Style it up.
People are like,
yeah.
Also not planned. My favorite's Operative.
Yeah.
So I love his humor, the lines he says. He's a lot of fun.
That's perfect. Much
All right,
better.
I thought I saw somebody that had their hands up right over here.
oh jeez. There's more.
Right behind, yep. And there too. Yeah, all over the place now. This is great. All right.
Hi, I actually have a tech-related question. Do you guys generally use pack maps for the textures for the VFX, or do you guys generally use like single-bit maps?
Samantha, you answered this because your presentation had an answer.
Those are like grape packs. Like we will actually, channel pack the textures a lot to help reduce memory. That's pretty common.
Yeah, for sure.
We also don't use alpha channels usually. That also helps.
Yeah.
Cool. Who else? Right over here. We've got a couple right behind you, Miranda.
She's a
All right, and then right after this question, we have time for one more question. Then we're going to have final comments. So go ahead with your question there.
Hi. I was just wondering, so since you're working on such a big product and like, you have to put a lot of time into it, I was wondering if you still have time for other things outside of it, or does it kind of like envelop you?
Like,
That's a great question.
Do we have fun?
Yeah.
I mean, I like to think so. Like, I don't know. I'm not a total stiff. Jeez, what have I been playing lately? I could like name drop some stuff. I'm all about video game stuff. I really don't know a whole lot about like film production or anything that's not video games. So I like Nier Automata. That's really good. I've been playing that. I actually just got to play Resident Evil 2, the remake. That was dope. A lot of respect for Platinum and Capcom. But yeah, I also just have found that it's really important that you're going out there and checking out the games that inspire you while you're working on this stuff, especially as you're trying to get better at visual effects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I got broke into Bayonetta finally and all of that.
Yeah.
Punishing. Oof. But fun.
Thank you for listening to me.
Yeah. I ask him a lot for recommendations. I mean, yeah, I still do art on the side. I'm also like an Ironman athlete, so like I do a lot of other things. So like, yeah, plenty of time.
I play Risk of Rain 2. It's amazing. Not because Gearbox published.
Side note.
But it's an amazing game. Like 2 people made it, and it's unbelievable. It's really cool. And then now it's on every console too, like PlayStation 4 and then Switch as well. So pretty awesome. And other than playing video games, I do practice Aikido at the studio. So the studio let us use one of the training rooms. So we had the mats. The studio actually got us the mats, so we actually could practice Aikido, and go home and take care of the family.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I used to do, or not as much lately, but I would do I'd make jewelry. That's something that I like to do in my spare time. Right now I'm playing Planet Zoo. That just came out, so I've been having a lot of fun with that. And Caitlyn and I actually play D&D as well, so yeah, that's stuff we like to do.
Nice, nice. All good, all well. We have time for one more question. Who's it going to be?
Yep, make it good.
Oh, right back here.
Hello. My question is just, what was your window of development for this game? So, like, how many months did you spend working on this?
I think with the exception of Samantha, it was just the full duration of the project, right? Like, everybody was just kind of moved onto it, so
yeah,
it's a 5-year project.
It's like, imagine 5 years not being able to tell anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was so hard.
I was definitely, you know what, shouts out to my cousin Levi for the guilt trip Facebook messages for years before we announced this thing. Appreciate that, Levi.
Are you guys working on that Borderlands 3?
Well, we are so glad you are sharing it with us now. I tell you that. You guys have any closing statements or anything as we start to wrap this up and then have a meet and greet with the Borderlands 3 team? Does that sound good?
Sure.
Does that sound good to you guys? Yeah. All right. You have anything last that you guys want to say before we just
I'm just
cut loose with this?
Take advantage of our platform here right now to say that I've still got Easter eggs in this game that people haven't found, and what's up with that? Hurry up.
Yeah,
getting impatient, checking Reddit every day.
Right.
Go out and buy Borderlands 3, play it, get the Easter eggs.
Yeah, because we're all online, we can all play together. I guess don't be afraid to come talk to us after this. We're all just 10 years in the future, so we're all super nerds who love all the same stuff that you do, so it's really not a big deal.
Yeah. Or sooner.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Less than I don't know.
Yeah, no, I meant or you're Seung, but you've been in the industry for some time. So just what I'm saying is we're just you, but in the future.
It took me 17 years to get to Gearbox. I mean, you guys took 1 year. What have we done?
What have you done?
As far as an artist, if you're not tech route, if you're an artist, don't feel afraid to try everything. Even modeling, just get your hands on it and try do as much as possible, but don't ever forget your fundamentals, which is figure drawings. Figure drawings will take you everywhere. I still do figure drawing. Gearbox actually offer figure drawing every week, so we could have a model come in, nude model, female model, male. We just always coming in. We get to do figure drawing. So a lot of even non-art people, like tech people, will come in and do figure drawings
Gonna
as
sit
well.
next to him
So,
and like be like,
yeah, continue to draw.
Why did he look at us while he was saying that? Come on.
So please take advantage of if the school actually offer figure drawing. You do it. You know, you can. It never goes wrong with figure drawings if you're an artist, and learn all the tools you can possibly could. If everybody asking you to concentrate on one program, that's fine. But you need to have a more ammunition to get into this industry. So, like I said, everybody has a different talent, but we actually get to do so many different things because we know much. We know different things. So, keep trying.
And Samantha, final thoughts
Oh, boy.
that you want to share, on the path to get where you are.
I think worry more about your fundamentals again. Like, don't worry so much about learning the specific tools. Like, yeah, they'll make your workflow faster, but a lot of it is these really, software agnostic tools. Like, if you're not, looking at being a visual effects artist, like, really, look at the principles of animation, look at the 2D design principles and
basics.
Yeah, the basics, like practice those things and it'll get you really far. Also, interpersonal communication, be nice to people and talk with people and know how to interact politely. It'll get you really far.
Very true.
And
That is
then
very true.
we're hiring. So apply.
And you guys can talk about that in just a second. Personally, with Samantha, Seung, Caitlyn, and Nicholas. So on behalf of Gnomon and Lenovo, I want to thank everybody for coming out. We're going to have a meet and greet right now with this wonderful team from Borderlands 3. So thank you guys so much for coming out. Let's give a shout out to this amazing team. Thank you guys so much for coming out.
Thank you.
Good night. Drive safe.